Hey, welcome to another dispatch with Holly McKay. Um, Today we're going to be talking a little bit freeform about natural disasters and empathy in the face of them. And there have been several natural disasters that have come up over the last year, with the most recent one being the one in Texas. The one before that has been big in the world, where there's been work going on by either myself or Holly in Los Angeles, and then the worry across the country that there may be another hurricane similar to what happened in North Carolina next year. And we just thought it would be a good idea to talk about that a little bit today. And let's start off with and the need for empathy and the difficulty of delivering empathy to people in such circumstances, or even preparing. So, Holly, let's start with Texas. The number of people missing just keeps climbing, and so like every day there's like the count goes up. Start with that.
Yeah, I mean, I just can't even begin to fathom or even remotely wrap my head around what that community is experiencing, what those families are experiencing. Um, the girls at the summer camp, the people camping, just the whole thing. I mean, there are cases where, there was one family that lost both their children, both their daughters, and with the grandparents as well, who I believe are still missing. I can't even begin to wrap my head around what kind of shock and pain that these people are experiencing. And I wrote a little bit about it, but it's almost this kind of bystander's guilt. And obviously, because this happened over the holiday weekend, and I was away, with friends in Florida at the beach, and I just kept thinking about it. And every moment that I was, maybe having a nice time, I just think about it, and I keep thinking about it, and it's so painful in the sense that the world just kind of moves on, the news cycle moves on, we go on to other things when there are still 160 people that are still missing from this. And i just yeah, I sort of look at it, and it's hard to figure out how to even approach a topic like that from sort of, yeah, a journalistic point of view, because I just can't even, I don't even think I have the words to articulate that kind of situation, and just the deep ramifications of that.
Yeah, well, actually, I think you do, and
Mm.
I will tell you why. Um, Over the weekend, um, you sent me uh, a little video of you putting Raven to sleep. Um, and uh, and I found that video very, very poignant, because I think at this point your reaction is, it's not journalism, it's human, right?
Mm.
And there were three words you said, and the way that you said it, that encapsulated it all to me. And she was saying goodnight, and you very, very quietly, in a way that I don't hear you say it very often, just said, "I love you." And I knew in an instant everything that was involved in saying those three words. And it was, I heard, "You're important. I don't want to lose you. I don't want to feel the same kind of pain that must be going through so many other people." And I know it's like a late night thing, right? You just showed up, but wow, you know, that vignette in that one single sentence of this is very painful, and I feel it, that so many people must be feeling exactly the same thing. And uh it's painfully beautiful, if you ask me. And so like, I don't know. I mean, like, that's why I wanted to bring this topic up of the empathy, in the face of natural disasters, is because, you know, there you are. You weren't being a reporter at that point. You were being a human observer. And I think that's important, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was always my philosophy with journalism is always that am a human first, and a journalist second. And I think that's part of the reason I wanted to move a little bit away from corporate journalism. Um, and I think in this day and age, I don't know that readers or viewers are looking necessarily for that kind of very distant, very stoic, very sort of straight-faced reporting on wars or natural disasters or whatever it may be, on any tragedy that was sort of the norm 10, 20 years ago, or traditionally in journalism. I think that people are certainly looking for a little bit more of a human touch to journalism now, which I think is sort of a nice thing. I think we can't look at these things that happen in the world and not not look at them from that very human point of view. And but I do at the same time at the same time I also do worry that just as human beings I feel like we've lost a lot of empathy that maybe we had before. I see the kind of rhetoric, the nastiness and whatever in commentary online, and I feel like I go on and on about this all the time, but I just I feel like we've sort of lost the power of what empathy is. And it's not sympathy, it's not sitting back and looking at somebody and feeling sorry for them. It's being able to imagine ourselves in their shoes, and being able to kind of, to the best of our ability, feel what they're feeling or resonate with their experience in some way, and let that shape our approach to things. And I feel like with such sort of political diversion and what can feel like a lot of hate in the world, I think that that's something that has to be worked on. It's empathy feels a little bit like a muscle that if you don't use it does wane. Or if you surround yourself with people who don't kind of take that point of view, it does wane um, from you. And I just sort of have observed that in some of my own personal relationships with people. Um, just comments that I've heard that I would never have expected to hear. And that does make me very concerned, because I do believe in journalism that leads with empathy. I believe in leading with empathy in our day-to-day lives. And had I in the past, had I had more superiors that had a little bit more of that personalized ability to personalize a situation, I think that it would have made a lot of difference, in my own career. But yeah, I worry that we're losing that empathy, and I harp on about it. But the power of empathy, I really believe in that as being um, a way to improve the world, as opposed to um, the kind of sort of hatred that I see a lot from all types of people currently.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, let me switch to the topic, because like one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about today is like empathy can turn into action. Lack of empathy can turn into inaction, particularly in the aftermath of large disasters. And as you know, for the past several months, I've been working here in Los Angeles in terms of looking at what to do for fire victims from the January 2025 fires, which burned thousands of houses, um, billions upon billions of damage, and an initial empathy for trying to find ways for the people that live there to be able to continue to live there. Um, But several months on, I have observed that a lot of that has turned into bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is not a great place for empathy to live. And much less coverage of the human impact that continues to be out there as far as the need of that community. And to create the kind of sense of urgency to make the bureaucracy move faster.
Mm.
And it bothers me that um, stories disappear when the need has not. And you've seen this many times before, uh, because you've dealt with the news cycle thing. There was I think a story that we wanted to cover in one of these videos a couple of weeks ago that the news cycle passed, and so like, what are you going to do about it, right? Even though it's a very, very important piece that you had written about, um, and it translates to inaction. Inaction that at a certain point will cause vulnerable people to start to fall through the cracks and never be able to recover. And you've seen this many times before. So, and this is happening in America. So from your perspective, you know, what what does journalism do when it starts to see that empathy and urgency are beginning to fall off the scope and bureaucracy
Mm.
and the coldness of it starts to take over?
Yeah. I mean, to be honest, I think journalism has really transformed a lot over the past. I mean, it's been almost 2 decades that I've been in this industry that I began very young. And I've seen it transform a lot, not only, with online, with AI, with other things, but just that I don't, and I say this as someone who still believes and loves journalism, but I don't think journalism has the power that it used to have. And I think that is a result of just an overload of noise. I think it's a result of a saturation of kind of sort of personal opinions that tend to be quite divisive politically. People aren't quite sure what to believe, or they sort of cling to the sort of the echo chamber of the voices that they want to hear. And I think that that has diluted journalism in a big way, that people don't trust journalists a lot, and there is certainly validity behind that. But I think that it feels a little bit like you're kind of banging your head against a wall, hoping somebody cares, and maybe you'll reach a few people, but I just don't, in all honesty, don't think it has the impact that it had when I first got into this profession. And that has certainly, given me pause for thought a number of times in recent years about, my future sort of in this industry. Is there a future in this industry? Is there a way to help people in a, and maybe in a different capacity that feels like it's a little bit more concrete? But just all in all, I think that it's while it's so great that there is so much there's so many resources out there to be able to obtain your information that isn't just relying on a traditional network the way that it used to be. But I also think that is certainly diminished kind of the power and presence that journalists had, especially to present a lot of those human stories. I think because they're not necessarily sort of politically popular, they're not going to kind of get the traction, and they're not necessarily going to influence um, decision makers that kind of go in the right direction. So yeah, that's kind of my maybe a little bit fatalist analysis on the situation there.
Yeah, well, uh, my observation on that, particularly with in the case of the Los Angeles case, so it's been half a year. They're the best that the government has been able to do is defer what they call forbearing payments on mortgages for these houses or for these homeowners. But they haven't been able to put them back into on their properties in the ways that they want to, and the bureaucracy is has now turned into like, how do you get these people there? What do you put up? And then what are the hurdles for permitting, which seem to be growing as time goes on, because that's what bureaucracy does. And
Mm.
so the pace of the response is slow, and from a human standpoint, the mental angst that is being put deeper and deeper into the community, that they may not have hope or that hope is beginning to diminish, and they're going to ultimately lose is there, even though the mechanisms are in place to expedite these things to move further. And I wonder from your standpoint, having looked at many of these kinds of disasters, both man-made and natural in the world, they're going to happen. And from a journalistic standpoint, um, even with all the noise in the internet, even with all the artificial intelligence systems that generate counter stories simply because they can write permutations and pop them into social media platforms to confuse the issues, and people that just get their jollies because they enjoy writing contrarian things. It's the basic antisocial behavior of some humans. So there's going to be another disaster. What will it look like? Probably the biggest worry right now is that there'll be another hurricane on the scale of what happened in North Carolina last year. And what do you think from the point of view of, does media stand a chance in creating the kind of empathy that leads to action? And what kind of policies do they need to do? I mean, you're more and more separated from how the inner world of that. But I think that also gives you perspective on what can be done better. And so I'd like your thoughts on that.
I think that, I mean, certainly the media, coverage can make a difference, but at the end of the day, it's up to us as individuals to, foster that empathy and take that approach. I don't think that is the responsibility of anybody else. No governments, no media, no external source can necessarily tell us how to think. And that's something that has to be, cultivated from within. And I do think that, yeah, it's an individual responsibility to respond to sort of situations in that way. And I think that certainly, yeah, media coverage can drive it, but at the end of the day, the buck stops with each of us and how we choose to respond to a situation. And it's hard because there's so much darkness in the world that we also have to take care of ourselves as well, in that we can't take on the burdens of everything that's happening around us. But I certainly think, that doesn't mean that we can't show empathy, when we hear or learn about these things. But there is a fine line of how much we can and can't take on. Um, and that's something that I certainly struggle with. That's something that's yeah. But I think when you are, you've worked in it, that you also have to be careful not to be jaded by it too, where when you don't react to these tragedies. I don't think, as a journalist, I'd ever want to get to that point. And I certainly feel at points in my career that maybe I have gotten to that point. I've had to bring myself out of it, or certainly remind myself that was not a normal reaction. But I think, yeah, it is a fine line of being able to sort of show empathy and care for one another while fostering sort of a sense of, I guess, self protection.
There you go. All right. Well, um, that we're going to close with that last question. I want everybody to know that Holly had no idea these were the questions that we're going to ask when we started these interviews. So these are very extemporaneous reactions, clearly from the heart and mind of somebody who has seen a lot in this world. So thanks, Holly. Really appreciate the fact that you're taking the time to share your thoughts, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you, Dennis.